Welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive? Today, we're going to be looking at Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and our listeners sent in some pretty fascinating excerpts from the book.
Ah.
And so let's get into it. What makes Dorian Gray such a captivating character, but also ultimately a tragic one?
Yeah, he's a character that really embodies so many of the anxieties that I think we all face, even today, even though the novel was published, well over 100 years ago.
Right, and we're not just looking at Dorian in isolation, right?
Yes, of course.
We're going to be looking at all those really big themes that Wilde kind of weaves throughout the story, beauty, youth, morality, and I think the often overlooked power of influence.
Yes, the influence.
Yeah,
That's where Lord Henry Wotton comes into the picture, wouldn't you say?
absolutely. I mean, Lord Henry is given some of the most, I don't know, just cutting lines in the whole book.
Yeah.
He says, for instance, beauty, real beauty, ends where an intellectual expression begins. Intellect is in itself a mode of exaggeration and destroys the harmony of any face.
Wow.
Right.
That's pretty harsh.
Yeah, talk about cynical.
Hmm.
Is that just Wilde being provocative, or do you think there's something more to that?
Well, I think Wilde is using Lord Henry to expose society's obsession with appearances.
Right.
And Lord Henry's words really cut through all that hypocrisy, don't they? I mean,
Yeah.
especially during the Victorian era when this was published.
Absolutely.
All that, glamour hiding the emptiness beneath.
It's almost like Lord Henry's setting a trap for Dorian, isn't it?
Kind of, yeah.
With all of his charm and wit to kind of lure him into this dangerous game.
Hmm.
And Dorian, he starts out so naive and impressionable. He just falls for it.
Varian's almost, well, I mean, the way he's presented at the beginning is almost angelically pure.
Yeah.
Like a blank canvas just waiting to be, painted on. And Lord Henry's the artist, in a way.
Yeah.
Using his words to create this portrait of hedonism and just self-indulgence on his soul.
And then there's the actual portrait,
Oh, yes.
the one Basil Hallward paints of Dorian. I mean,
Mhm.
this is where things take a seriously dark turn.
For sure.
Dorian makes a wish, and he's afraid of losing his youthful beauty,
Of course.
and so he wishes for the portrait to age instead of him.
It's like a Faustian bargain, really.
It really is.
This wish, and, it's granted in kind of a supernatural way,
Mhm.
it sets in motion Dorian's, just descent into this world of consequence-free depravity.
Right.
He maintains this youthful facade, but the portrait becomes just this horrifying visual record of everything that's happening to his soul.
So I have to ask you, if you were offered that same deal to stay eternally youthful while a hidden portrait bore the weight of your actions, would you accept it?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Um,
There's something just so unsettling about that image, isn't there?
yeah.
Of the portrait aging and just decaying. Uh-huh.
While Dorian remains untouched.
I think it really taps into our fears about aging and mortality.
It really does.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it also raises those questions about the nature of the soul.
Right.
What is it? Is it something that can be captured in a work of art?
Right. Right.
Or is it something bigger than that?
Uh.
Something that we can't see or touch?
Much more elusive.
And this is where I think this story of Sybil Vane comes in, don't you think?
Yes, definitely.
So Dorian falls for this young actress, but her love for him actually makes her a worse actress.
That's interesting.
Yeah, because her emotions become real. They're not pretend anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what Lord Henry has taught him to despise, right?
Right. Authenticity.
Exactly.
He wants something artificial.
Right.
Love that's all on the surface.
And so he rejects her.
And she kills herself.
It's just such a pivotal moment, I think.
Oh, it is. It's the turning point in the whole novel. That's where Dorian descends into true darkness.
Yeah. And the way he reacts, oh, it's chilling.
It's just this lack of remorse.
He's just internalized all of Lord Henry's philosophy.
Yeah, turning tragedy into this kind of, I don't know, aesthetic experience.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like he's traded all of his compassion
Uh-huh.
for this detached way of looking at the world.
Like he's viewing life through this warped lens
Yeah.
where suffering is just, something to be contemplated from a distance.
Do you think we're all susceptible to that kind of manipulation?
That's a good question.
Could someone like Lord Henry, with his charm, with the way he talks,
Yeah.
could they influence our values, make us see the world differently?
I think that's one of the reasons why this book is still so powerful today.
Right.
It makes us think about our own vulnerabilities, Are we as strong as we think we are?
And speaking of mirrors, let's go back to that portrait for a moment. Because it's not just a reflection of Dorian's soul.
No, it's not.
It's this powerful symbol of, what happens when we make certain choices. While he stays young and beautiful, that portrait becomes just this grotesque, image of all the ugliness he's carrying inside.
It's like beauty is only skin deep,
Oh.
taken to a whole other level.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, is there any way back for him?
Can he escape? Or is he doomed?
Yeah.
We'll have to explore that further as we look closer at these excerpts, but it's certainly something to think about, isn't it?
Absolutely. We've just scratched the surface here. There's so much more to unpack.
I agree.
So let's take a closer look at some of these passages that you, the listeners, sent in
Sounds good.
to see how Wilde develops these themes and really reveals the inner workings of Dorian Gray's character.
There's a passage about Dorian's reaction to Sybil's death that really stuck with me.
Oh, yeah.
He just seems so much more worried about how it looks than about, an actual person dying.
I know what you mean.
He's treating it like it's a performance or something.
Right.
He even says, I'm paraphrasing here, but he says that real tragedies lack style.
Oh.
Like they're too, I don't know, crude and meaningless to be beautiful.
It's like he's taken Lord Henry's philosophy to heart.
Absolutely. Turn tragedy into, well, an aesthetic experience.
Which is pretty disturbing when you think about how much Sybil loved him.
Right. She saw him as, this Prince Charming figure.
Yeah, someone worthy of real love. But it shows just how different Dorian's outward charm is from, what's really going on inside.
That gap between appearance and reality.
Yeah.
That's something Wilde comes back to again and again.
Right, like with the portrait
Exactly.
hidden away in the attic, concealed from the world.
Like Dorian's true nature.
It's like this, I don't know, physical manifestation of his double life.
Yes. The Dorian everyone sees. He's young, he's charming.
Right, but the portrait shows us the truth.
The horrifying truth.
Mm.
That his soul is, well, it's bearing the weight of everything he's done.
So as the portrait gets uglier and uglier,
Dorian becomes more and more obsessed with keeping it hidden.
like he's trying to outrun his own reflection.
But of course he can't.
Yeah. In some ways, I think Dorian's story is kind of like the myth of Narcissus.
Oh, interesting.
He's so captivated by his own beauty that he loses sight of who he really is.
They both end up destroyed by their vanity.
Exactly.
And that brings us to another big question.
What's that?
What role does art play in all of this?
Well, Wilde definitely explores that relationship.
Between art and life?
Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, you have Basil Hallward. He sees art as this way to capture, I don't know, truth and beauty.
Mm.
But then you have Lord Henry, who thinks art can be used to manipulate people.
To control how they see the world.
Right. And then there's Dorian himself. He becomes like a living work of art.
Shaped by Lord Henry.
His life is just this performance, designed to hide everything that's going on beneath the surface.
There's that part where he talks about burying himself in, art, music, literature.
I remember that.
Trying to escape from all the ugliness he's created.
Right, but he's just using those things to avoid facing himself.
I think so too.
It's like he's trying to drown out his conscience.
But real art,
Yeah.
it has a way of showing us the truth, even when it hurts.
And we can't forget about, the social commentary in the novel either.
Wilde was writing at a time when Victorian society was full of hypocrisy.
Right, like this facade of respectability.
But underneath,
it's darkness.
And Dorian is this perfect example of that hypocrisy.
Right. Moving through high society, charming everyone he meets.
But hiding this terrible secret.
He's this walking contradiction, isn't he?
The epitome of youth and beauty.
But carrying all this ugliness inside.
It makes him such a fascinating character.
It's like he shows both sides of human nature.
The good and the evil.
Yeah, and that's even more clear when you look at his relationship with Basil Hallward.
Basil.
The artist who painted the portrait.
Right.
He represents this, moral compass for Dorian.
He sees the good in him, even when Dorian himself can't.
And their conversations, I don't know, you can feel the struggle.
Dorian's drawn to Basil's goodness.
Yeah, but he also resents him for it.
Because it reminds him of what he's lost.
Exactly, and that tension.
And it leads to tragedy.
I mean, Basil's murder is a turning point in the novel.
It is.
There's no going back after that.
And the way Wilde describes it,
It's so chilling.
Dorian just has no remorse at all.
Yeah, it makes you wonder if there's any hope for someone like that.
If they can do something that awful, can they ever be redeemed?
But even after that, there are these moments where it seems like Dorian feels something.
Like a flicker of conscience.
Right, like he regrets what he's done, like he wants to escape from all this darkness.
Like when he meets Adrian Singleton.
Oh, that's a good example. He sees himself in Adrian, doesn't he?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
This young man who's thrown his life away on, you know, vice and dissipation.
I love that line where someone points at Dorian and says, "There goes the devil's bargain."
It gives me chills every time.
I know, right?
Shows that Dorian's secret isn't completely hidden.
Yeah, some people can sense the darkness in him.
They know he's paid a price for his eternal youth.
Do you think if someone had confronted him, if they had really called him out?
Do you think he could have changed?
Yeah. Or was it too late?
I don't know. I think Wilde leaves that up to the reader to decide.
But it raises these questions about free will.
And the power of influence,
Yeah, and then we get to the last few chapters of the book.
where the tension really ramps up.
Dorian becomes so reckless.
Haunted by his past. Paranoid.
Paranoid.
Lashing out at anyone who gets too close.
And his obsession with the portrait just grows stronger and stronger.
He can't escape that image of his soul. It's this constant reminder of everything he's done.
It's like a metaphor for guilt, isn't it?
Trying to bury it, but it always finds a way to surface.
And then it all leads to that final scene.
This confrontation between Dorian and, well, himself.
The truth he can't escape.
This is it. The moment of truth for Dorian Gray.
He finally has to face the consequences.
You know, I think this is where Wilde really shows us what he can do as a writer. The ending is just so, I don't know, so powerful.
Oh.
It's both tragic and inevitable.
Right.
Dorian decides he has to destroy the portrait.
But isn't it kind of ironic that he tries to destroy the thing that's been, like, judging him all this time?
He spent his whole life trying to escape from it,
Right.
but at the same time, he's drawn to it.
So what is he trying to do? Destroy his past? Kill off the last part of himself that's real?
Well, by attacking the portrait, he's attacking the truth, isn't he?
Yeah, I guess so.
He's rejecting who he's become.
And the truth always comes out, right? What
Right.
happens?
Well, it's pretty devastating. He tries to destroy the portrait, but he ends up destroying himself.
Oh, wow.
His outer appearance finally reflects the ugliness inside,
It's almost too perfect, in a way.
like cosmic justice. He wanted to stay young forever,
Right.
but he ends up destroyed, not by time itself, but by the decay of his soul.
What about the portrait? What happens to it?
It goes back to the way it was before. Beautiful, pure.
Like nothing ever happened.
It's a powerful statement about art, I think.
How so?
It shows that art can be this, I don't know, this beacon of beauty, even in the face of ugliness.
So the portrait is redeemed, even though Dorian isn't?
Exactly. I mean, we as people, we might give in to temptation.
Make bad choices.
But true art, it has this ability to stay pure.
So after all this, after everything we've talked about, what do you think is the main takeaway? What's Wilde trying to tell us?
I think he's making us think about what we value.
What's really important?
Right. He's warning us about being too vain, too obsessed with how we look.
Yeah.
But he's also reminding us that real beauty comes from within.
It's a message that's still so relevant today.
Absolutely. We're still obsessed with youth and beauty. Appearances are everything.
The picture of Dorian Gray forces us to look at the darkness that might be hiding underneath all that.
And it's been fascinating talking about all this with you.
It really has.
Wilde's novel, even in these little pieces, it shows us that our choices matter. And that the only way to deal with the truth is to face it.
Well said. I hope you, the listeners, have enjoyed this deep dive. What parts of Dorian's story resonated with you? What truths about yourselves or about our world did you discover? Keep exploring these questions and keep seeking out stories that challenge you to think. Until next time, happy reading.